"Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel." He didn't even argue. He didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch, didn't say a single word. Just stood up, took his keys off the table, and walked out, right in front of everyone. And I just stood there, trying to act like that wasn't the most humiliating moment of my entire life. It was supposed to be a birthday dinner. Casual, fun, nothing fancy, just a few friends from his department and their partners. The restaurant was loud, crowded, and smelled like overcooked shrimp. I had been dreading it all week, mostly because I knew things were off between us, and forcing small talk with strangers wasn't going to fix that. But I didn't expect it to explode the way it did. It all started when everyone started telling stories about funniest arguments they'd had as couples. Someone said they once fought about how to fold laundry. Someone else mentioned a fight about the thermostat. Everyone laughed. I forced a chuckle. Then one of his coworkers, a smug little guy with perfect teeth and the confidence of a game show host, turned to me and asked, "So what about you two? What's the most ridiculous thing you've fought about?" Without thinking, I said, "Probably how he never listens." The table laughed again, but I wasn't joking. He froze. I saw the corner of his jaw tighten. But I wasn't done. "Actually," I added, loud enough that other tables probably heard, "we could probably end most of our arguments if he just stopped pretending I'm not speaking half the time." The laughter died. He looked at me, really looked, and said nothing. That's when I felt it. The need to control the moment. To push harder. To make him react. So I gave him an ultimatum, right there at the table. "Listen or leave," I said. "Right now? In front of everyone. You choose." And just like that, he chose. He didn't yell, didn't plead, just grabbed his coat, his keys, and walked straight out into the cold night. No drama, no last glance. And I stood there, mouth dry, palms sweating, heart pounding in my ears while everyone pretended to keep eating like nothing happened. I thought he'd come back after cooling off. I thought he'd text, or at least leave a note. But he didn't. And the thing I found the next morning? That's when I realized I may have just destroyed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch in the dark, phone in hand, screen lighting up my face every few minutes as I checked for a message that never came. I kept refreshing the GPS app we'd installed to track each other's phones during a hiking trip 2 years ago, the one he forgot I still had access to. It showed him parked near a cheap roadside motel on Route 16. That little blinking dot stayed there from midnight to morning. I knew exactly what it meant. At 7:08 a.m., the icon finally moved. He was heading west, away from town, away from me. I watched it disappear from the map like a dying heartbeat. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. Instead, I stared out the kitchen window and noticed his mug still in the sink, the one with the little crack on the handle he refused to replace. Somehow, that stupid mug made me feel worse than the silence. By noon, I had convinced myself that he just needed space, that he'd come back once he cooled down. I even started rehearsing an apology in my head, something that sounded sincere, maybe with a joke at my own expense, the kind of line he used to fall for when we were still in sync. But the door didn't open. No text came. Nothing. And then, just after 3 p.m., someone knocked. I opened the door expecting it to be him. It wasn't. It was Declan. Declan, of all people. His older brother. The one who barely ever visited. The one who only called on holidays and showed up to family dinners with an unopened bottle of wine and too many opinions. I hadn't seen Declan in almost a year, and now here he was, standing on my porch like a ghost summoned by regret. I blinked at him. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer right away, just stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and stared at me like he was trying to see through my skin. "You really told him to leave? In front of all those people?" I felt my stomach twist. "He told you. He didn't have to. Everyone's talking about it. You embarrassed him, made him feel small." Declan's voice wasn't angry. It was worse, disappointed. I didn't know what to say. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream that I didn't mean it, that I panicked, that I was tired of being invisible. But all I managed to whisper was, I didn't think he'd actually go. Declan scoffed. "You thought he'd just take it like always?" Then he handed me something. A small black notebook. "He left this at Mom's place. Thought you might want to read what's inside." Before I could ask what it was, he walked out. And I stood there, staring at the cover of that notebook. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. Because once I opened it, everything started to unravel. At first, I thought the notebook was just another one of his sketchbooks. He kept a dozen half-used ones around the house, some filled with doodles from boring meetings, others crammed with old grocery lists and budget plans. But this one was different. It had a weight to it. Not just physical, but emotional. Like it had absorbed everything I'd missed while I was too busy pretending we were fine. The first page was dated 8 months ago. If she rolls her eyes again tonight, I might finally tell her I'm not a ghost. My chest tightened. I read that line over and over, trying to process the fact that he'd written about me. That sentence alone was a punch to the gut. But I kept going. I couldn't stop. I don't know when she stopped seeing me. Maybe after the 4th forgotten anniversary. Or maybe when I started making excuses for her coldness instead of confronting it. I keep thinking she's still in there. The version of her who used to memorize my coffee order, the one who used to kiss my eyelids in the morning like some stupid ritual. But maybe she's gone. Maybe she just doesn't care anymore. I had to sit down. He hadn't told me any of this. Not once. Not even a hint. I thought we were both just tired, stressed, going through that long marriage burnout phase people joked about online. But he'd been bleeding internally for months, maybe longer. I flipped through the pages, feeling each one like a cut. I tried bringing up therapy. She laughed and said I wasn't that deep. I tried cooking dinner for her last week, thinking it'd soften the edges. She said it tasted like cardboard and ordered takeout. I swear, it's like she wants me to be invisible so she has someone to blame when things fall apart. He was right. I had laughed. I thought he was joking. I always thought he was just being dramatic. But maybe I was the one who had hardened. Maybe I'd been so focused on maintaining the upper hand that I didn't notice I was alone at the top. Then came the final entry, dated 2 days before the dinner party. I have a bag packed. It's in the trunk of my car. If she pushes me again, I'm gone. No fight. No drama. Just keys, door, silence. She'll never see it coming, and maybe then, she'll finally see me. I didn't even realize I was crying until I noticed the drops hitting the page. He'd planned it. Every part of it. I thought I was in control that night, giving him an ultimatum, showing him I wasn't afraid to make a scene. But the truth was, he had already left me days ago. All I did was give him permission to walk. I closed the notebook and stared at the door like he might walk through it. Apologize. Say he just needed time. But all I heard was silence. Except that silence didn't last. Because at 4:17 p.m., my phone lit up with a message that would change everything. And it wasn't from him. I don't remember hearing the message tone. I must have just been staring blankly at the wall, still gripping that black notebook like it was radioactive. But the vibration jolted me back into the present, and when I picked up my phone, I saw a name I hadn't thought about in years. Emery Langley. She was his college roommate, the one he used to call his platonic soulmate. We'd met only once in person, years ago at our engagement dinner. She brought him a handwritten letter and a weird keychain shaped like a lobster claw. I remember silently hating her confidence. She was warm, magnetic, a little too comfortable sitting close to him. But he always said, Emery's not a threat. She's just Emery. Her message read, Barrett is staying with me. He's safe. I don't know what happened, but I haven't seen him like this since 2012. You might want to ask yourself why that is. I stared at the screen. Not because I didn't understand the words, but because I suddenly felt that horrible, unmistakable tightness in my chest again. He hadn't just left. He had run to someone else. Not romantically. I didn't even think it was that. But still, he had chosen her. The moment things fell apart, he didn't go to a hotel, a friend, or even his mother. He went to Emery. And then I did the exact thing I shouldn't have. I called her. It rang once. Twice. Then she picked up. Hey, she said, her voice calm. Too calm. Wasn't expecting you to call. Where is he? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He's in the shower. I'm not giving you the address, if that's where this is going. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream something sharp and cutting that would land like a slap across the phone line. But all that came out was a pathetic, broken, why didn't he call me? There was a long pause. Then she said, because he's done calling people who don't hear him. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, I said quietly. I believe you, she said. But that doesn't mean you didn't do it. I should have hung up, but instead I asked, is he okay? No, she answered. But he's calmer now. He's talking in full sentences again. Something about that made me cry harder than I had in years. I was losing him, and he wasn't even fighting me on it. He had handed me the pieces of himself, and I'd carelessly let them fall. Now someone else was carefully sweeping them up, and it wasn't me. When the call ended, I sat in the hallway for what felt like hours. I didn't know what to do. Call his mom? Write an email? Just show up at Emery's door and beg? But then I remembered something. A drawer in his office he always kept locked. I found the key taped to the back of one of his sketchbooks. And when I opened that drawer, what I found inside made my knees buckle. Because it wasn't just filled with secrets, it was filled with plans. Real, terrifying, detailed plans. And that's when I realized he hadn't just walked out. He had been planning to disappear from my life for far longer than I ever imagined. I used to joke that he was the organized one in our relationship. The keeper of receipts, the guy who color-coded our monthly budget spreadsheets, the person who alphabetized the spice rack and labeled chords in the junk drawer. I thought it was sweet, maybe a little obsessive, but harmless. I never thought to ask what else he might be organizing or hiding behind those neat little systems of his. The drawer was shallow but dense. On top was a manila folder with my name on it. Not his. Mine. That alone sent a chill down my spine. I opened it with trembling hands, expecting, I don't know, maybe another notebook. Maybe some emotional venting he didn't want me to see. But no, this was something else. Inside were printed copies of emails. My emails. Work stuff, personal notes. Even that one message I sent to my friend Serena last winter where I complained about feeling bored and disconnected. He had printed it out. Highlighted sections. Underlined the phrase, "Sometimes I wonder if I settled." Below that was a checklist. A literal checklist. Cancel gym membership. Remove name from joint account. Transfer savings. Store backup of documents. Pack trunk bag discreetly. Change emergency contact info. Talk to Emery, if necessary. Every item was dated. Some from weeks ago, others from months earlier. He'd been laying the groundwork while I was too wrapped up in my own restlessness to notice. There was even a printed apartment listing for a small one-bedroom in a nearby city. The price was modest. The location? 2 blocks from a botanical garden we once visited during our first year together. The same day he'd told me he wanted to grow old with me. I remember laughing at the time, calling it cheesy. But now, it felt like a burial site for our entire relationship. Underneath the papers, I found a flash drive. When I plugged it into his old laptop, it opened instantly, no password. Just a single folder labeled Barrett, Final. Inside were photos. Not compromising ones. Just sad ones. Him sitting alone on the porch with coffee. Him sleeping on the couch with a book on his chest. Him standing in the mirror, taking a selfie in a wrinkled button-down, looking like he was trying to convince himself to exist. But the worst photo? One I didn't remember being taken. It was me, laughing at my phone, eyes locked on something, probably a meme or a text. In the background, slightly blurred, was Barrett, his eyes on me. Hello. The caption on the image file was, "She never looked back." And he was right. I hadn't. I'd walked through this marriage assuming he'd always be there, orbiting me like a moon. I never thought he'd break away. Never thought he had the courage. But he did. And the worst part? I was starting to understand why. I waited 2 days before I finally drove to the address on the apartment listing I found in his drawer. I told myself I just wanted to see if it was real, if he'd actually gone through with it. Maybe it was all a bluff. Maybe he just printed it out in a moment of anger and hadn't followed through. Maybe there was still time. But the second I turned onto that quiet street and saw his car parked out front, I knew. The building was old but charming, with ivy crawling up one side and an iron fence that made it feel strangely distant. There was a single box of succulents on the windowsill, plants I recognized from our old bathroom. I parked across the street and sat in the car, staring at that stupid window like it was a portal to another life. And then, without letting myself think too hard, I got out. My legs felt like wet paper. I walked up the steps and knocked. Once. Twice. No answer. I knocked again, softer this time. The door opened, but it wasn't him. It was Emery. She looked tired. Not surprised, not angry, just disappointed. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her. "He's not ready to talk to you," she said gently. "I don't want to fight," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I just want to see him." "I know, but that's not what he wants right now." She said it like it was a fact, like it was gravity, something unchangeable. I hated her for it, but I couldn't argue. I stood there in silence, feeling more pathetic than I ever had. Then I asked, "Did he really move in here? This quickly?" Emery hesitated. "He signed the lease 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks. That meant he planned this before the dinner, before the note in her purse, before I ever raised my voice. He said he'd wait until I gave him a reason, she added quietly. And apparently, you did. I don't know what happened next, if it was the way she said it, or the realization that my marriage had been dissolving in front of me while I was focused on winning meaningless arguments, but my knees buckled and I sat down on the front step like a child. I buried my face in my hands and whispered, "He used to love me so loudly." Emery sat beside me, arms folded, and didn't speak for a while. Eventually, she said, "He still does. But now he loves himself more." And that line, that broke me, because I realized I had spent years asking him to shrink so I could feel bigger. Years of brushing off his hurt, laughing at his vulnerability, and then blaming him for the distance I created. When I finally stood up, Emery gave me a key. Not to his apartment. No, that was never going to happen. It was to our old storage unit. He said, "If you ever come looking, this is where the rest of the story is." I drove there the same night, and when I opened that unit and turned on the light, the first thing I saw made me drop the key, because it was a framed photograph of our wedding. Smashed, face down, and taped to the back of it was a note. "This is where you stopped looking at me." The fluorescent light flickered as I stepped further inside. The air smelled like dust and old regrets. I hadn't been to the unit in years, not since we moved into the house and agreed to deal with the boxes later. Of course, later never came. And now I was standing in a silent, cold room filled with pieces of the life I didn't realize had already died. There was no organization, not like him. No neat rows or labels this time. Just chaos. Torn boxes, shattered glass, and objects arranged like someone had thrown them in with more emotion than care. But it wasn't careless. It was deliberate. This was a place built to hold the things he didn't want to see anymore, but couldn't bring himself to destroy. I picked up the wedding photo. The frame was cracked, the glass jagged, but the picture was intact. We looked so young. He had a tiny wrinkle in his forehead from trying not to cry. I remember making fun of him for it later, calling him a softie in front of his friends. He had smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. The note was taped to the back, same handwriting as the notebook. Simple, unpolished, brutally honest. "This is where you stopped looking at me. You were smiling at the camera, not at me. It was always like that. Everyone else saw me more than you ever did." I sat down on an overturned box labeled Barrett's Winter Coats. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore. Forgiveness? Closure? Some sign he hadn't meant all of this? That's when I saw the suitcase. The same maroon suitcase he took to our honeymoon in May. The zipper was half open, as if inviting me in. I pulled it onto my lap and opened it. Inside were things I hadn't thought about in years. A dried-out concert ticket from the band he loved. The one I always said was too melancholy. A postcard I once wrote but never sent. And at the bottom, a sealed envelope addressed to me. No name. Just, "If she ever comes here." I held it for what felt like a lifetime before I tore it open. The letter wasn't long, but it hurt more than anything he'd ever said to my face. "I don't hate you. That would be easier. I just finally realized that loving you meant disappearing a little more every day. And I'm tired of being invisible in my own story." That sentence gutted me, because deep down, I knew it was true. I had spent years asking him to be strong, to be quiet, to be stable, which really meant I wanted him to be small, easy, predictable. And now, the silence I once begged for was all I had left. I put everything back into the suitcase, zipped it shut, and sat in the darkness for a while. Then my phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number. Just a single line. "You're not done yet. Look under the shelf." My heart stopped. I turned toward the far wall, where a heavy metal shelf was pushed against the corner. Something about it felt untouched. I walked over, crouched down, and saw the edge of a small box tucked beneath it. I pulled it out. Inside was a USB drive. No label. No note. Just one final message waiting to be played. I sat in the car with the flash drive clutched in my hand, debating whether to watch it. Part of me was terrified it would be some kind of final goodbye, or worse, a confirmation that I had completely lost him. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the way he used to hum while making coffee, or the way he'd pause mid-sentence just to make sure I was listening, that part needed to see it. When I got home, I plugged it into my laptop. There was only one file, a video titled, "For When You're Finally Ready." I hit play. The screen flickered, then settled on him. Barrett, sitting on a bench in what looked like the botanical garden near his new apartment. He looked tired, but peaceful. Sunlight hit one side of his face, and he smiled, but it was a small, unsure smile. The kind you wear when you're walking away from something you once believed in. "Hey," he said, "if you're watching this, it means you've found the key. And if you found the key, maybe you're finally starting to see things the way I did." He paused, looking off to the side. A bird chirped in the background. "I want you to know something. I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. But I couldn't keep loving you while losing myself. I had to choose me this time. Not out of spite. Not to punish you. But to remember who I am when I'm not constantly shrinking." He took a breath, then leaned forward. "But if you're still watching, then maybe you're growing, too. And that means there's hope. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if we'll find our way back to each other. But I'm open. I'm healing. And if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'm here. Not as your husband, just as me. And maybe that's a better place to start." The video ended. No dramatic music. No clever edits. Just him, raw and real. I sat in silence, tears running freely. But this time, they weren't from grief. They were from something softer, lighter, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next day, I wrote him a letter. No begging. No promises. Just honesty. I told him I had started therapy, that I wasn't expecting anything, that I finally understood what he meant all those times he said, "I feel like furniture." And I told him I wanted to get to know him again, from the beginning, if he'd let me. He wrote back 4 days later. 2 lines. "Thank you for seeing me. Let's take it slow." We met a week later at that same garden. No hugs. No labels. Just coffee and soft conversation. It felt unfamiliar, but in the best way. Like opening a book you loved once, but forgot the plot too. And now you get to read it again, with wiser eyes. I don't know what comes next. But this time, I'm finally looking at him. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything fell apart, only to realize it was the beginning of something better? Tell us your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more unforgettable stories just like this.